live. Today is Friday the 9th of June 2023. I'm reading out of Joan Grants' far memory book, Winged Pharaoh. It was published in 1937. I have been reading quite a bit of it, actually. She is here in this life, Sekita, and she co-rules Calm with her brother, Nea. They are here on a visit to Minoas. Chapter 6. Temple Ritual of Minoas. In the temples of Calm, all days are equal, and there is no day more important than another on which to seek counsel of the priests. To think of wisdom only on a day apart, as if it's a man should thirst for 6 days and drink water from the river by his door only upon the 7th. In Calm, 1 day in 7 a man does not labour, and fishermen leave their nets and walk in the bean fields, and the oxen stand idle while the ploughman drinks his beer. For it is well that all should have a time for sleeping in the shade. If a man would think long thoughts, he can think them whether his hands are working, or whether he but stirs the air of a hot noon with a fan to cool his rest. Yet to the people of Minoas, the gods are not the breath of their nostrils, but are kept separate from their ordinary lives. Only on days set apart, when vintagers pick no grapes and the ships sleep at anchor, do these people go to the temple. Yet even this is not a thing of their hearts, but it is a ceremonial which they perform. Upon such a day, Nea and I went with Kiodas to the temple of Praxitlares. It stood on a wide terrace on the mountainside. There was no forecourt, but a long flight of steps led up to the portico, whose fluted pillars were painted in soft rose colours, and it was as though the temples were carved from dusky coral. Inside it was a great hall of audience, lit from above through hidden windows in the roof. The walls were painted to look like archways, and through them one could see a frieze of sacred bulls and girls and youths playing on reed pipes. On a massive stone altar was a statue of Zeus, god of thunder. In his right hand was a sword, and in the other, upraised above his head, he held rods of lightning. Facing the statue were the 2 royal thrones, high-backed and gilded and elaborately carved. Upon each side of them had been placed another for Nea and me. Beside us were the Minoan nobles in degree of rank, and the rest of the hall was packed with a dense crowd, some standing, some sitting on wooden benches. When we were seated, the high priest entered through a curtained doorway from behind the statue. His robe of purple silk, thrown over one shoulder and leaving the other bare, reached to the ground in heavy sculptured folds. Boys in sleeved tunics of brilliant green followed him, swinging copper incense burners of aromatic leaves. Then came 2 girls carrying a double-handed dish, on which lay a freshly slaughtered kid. The blood was still dripping from its throat as they placed it before the altar. Then the high priest began to speak his ritual prayers. I could understand little of what he said, and I found his voice bemusing to clear thought, and drowsy as a bee on a hot summer's day. Time seemed as slow as a snail's track on a path. I wondered if they thought Zeus found pleasures in this prolonged and monotonous appeal, if in his numerous words the high priest could send a call towards the stars, or if his message died with the echoes in this room. Then there was a stirring rustle from all the people, who must have become as somnolent as I. It sounded like an oryx running through dry reeds. I realized why interest had returned to them when, to the music of cymbals and the high clear notes of a flute, 12 dancing girls came to the curtained doorway. They carried bows and quivers of arrows hung at their girdles. On their heads they wore a silver sickle moon, and their thin tunics, the color of the night sky, were caught above their breast with silver cords. Artemiodas whispered to me that they were the handmaidens of the moon goddess, and they had come to woo Zeus, so that he should not challenge her rulership of the night sky with his thunderclouds. The girls danced in supplication before the statue, their arms fluid as moonlight on rippling water. The piping grew more shrill, and they feigned terror of the wrath of the thunder god, as the clashing of cymbals, the music of Zeus, heralded the storm. Then, to show that they had won his gentleness, the cymbals were muted, till they were like the murmur of long waves that followed a storm. After this, the dancers and the acolytes burst into a song of praise, in which they promised Zeus that if he should keep his lightning leashed within his hands, and let the almond groves be heavy with fruit, the oil jars would be filled, and 1,000 lamps burn in his honor. And if the vineyards were fruitful, the wine vats would overflow, and all the people should drink to his name. It was so like a spectacle at a banquet that I almost told Artemiodas how much I admired the dancers and singers that she had got for our amusement, before I remembered that I was watching a ritual ceremony in a temple. It is not in the nature of these people to look on dancing girls unmoved, yet they were as grave as the people of the two lands when they listened to the reading of the laws. In calm, a temple is a place where will is sharpened and thought made clear, but here the mind is dulled with ritual, so that the hearers sway on the verge of sleep, and then the senses are delighted. On the altar stood a bowl of fine glazed pottery, painted with temple scenes in black and white, black and red. It was filled with oil, which came from an almond tree that had been struck by lightning, yet had not died, but had lived on as 2 trees. With this oil the high priest anointed the king and queen on the forehead, breast, and eyes, and he anointed Nea and me also, after we had assented. It pleased him that we joined in his ritual. He did not know that in calm we hold the gods of other countries in respect, unless they be of the train of Set. There is but one truth, and one great brotherhood, and all gods, if they be true gods, must be of that company, in whatever form the people on earth may picture them. And even if that which is called a god is but a statue having no spirit in the universe, still would it be against our teaching to treat that little, which is furthest such people can attain without courtesy. Then in ceremonial procession the high priest left the presence of the god as he had come. And when we left the temple, I was surprised to find that it was still 2 hours before noon, for it seemed that the shadows of evening would be lying across the land, so long had been this ceremony. In the drowsy hours of early afternoon, when all the palace rested, Nea and I talked long together of the morning ceremony. We were in the arbour of our private terrace. I was lying on blue cushions, idly watching the patterns of the leaves against the sky, and Nea sat with his arms clasped round his knees, staring out towards the sea. Suddenly he broke in on my sleepy silence and said, "If understanding is the fruit of experience, I must be a man firstborn on earth, for I can understand nothing of these people's temples. I spent 2 hours this morning watching the high priest walk with part in brilliant pageantry, while he mouthed ritual prayers, and not one word of wisdom fell upon my ears. Not even the simplest laws of how mankind should live among each other. He must be fool or charlatan, or both. By the way, he tried to bargain with his god. He might have been a huckster in the marketplace, trying to buy his compassion with promises of wine and sacrificial priests, and to beguile him with dancing girls as if he were a rich merchant, ancient of loins. There is not one among them who is winged, who can fly beyond the small confines of earth, though none can see a greater part of Godhead than can be encompassed by the age of their spirit. They should at least allow their gods as much of wisdom as they have themselves. Yet, though the vainest noble would distrust a man who praised him to his face, for the net of flattery is coarsely meshed. They praise Zeus as if he could be swayed by flattery." I told Nea that when I asked Kiodas if they had temple councillors in Minoas, he had seemed surprised, and had said that when his people had disputes they kept them until one of his overseers went to their village. Then Nea said, "Have you noticed that if one speaks of death, these people are embarrassed? It is as if one had broken some rule of custom, which made them feel as I should have. When sitting in audience, I realized that I had forgotten to put on my beard. They seem not to fear death, yet they will not talk about it. Think of their courage in the bull court. They are careless of death for their companion, and when that boy was killed, I noticed that not even the women turned their eyes away. No one is afraid to talk of what they know, so it must be that to them the face of death is veiled. What do they hope from death? A shadowy country where they can relive their earth, or oblivion in a pool of unending night? They don't even know that a priest must be one who can say, 'I can tell you of the littleness of death. For to me it's a gateway. For me its gateway has a long familiarity, and I can tell you how to live your lives, so that when once again you walk through her portals, you will rejoice at what you find therein.' Nea pointed to 5 ships that were rounding the rocky headland to the west, and he said, 'They pride themselves, and rightly, upon their fleet, and they would not take a blind pilot upon their deck and expect him to lead them to safe anchorage, nor would they take one who said to them, "I cannot tell you of my knowledge where the rocks are hidden, but I believe this is the course on which you should set your oar." If such a person dared claim to be a pilot, they would throw him into the sea, and he would have richly earned a lengthy swim. Yet they allow the course of their lives to be set by men whose gateways are not open. Sikita, though Kyodas has no conception of what a priest really is, I think that while he was in calm, he saw how much our temples mean to the people, and how we are strong in our gods. He has a deep respect for our wisdom, although he does not understand it, and if you asked him to let us send a priest to his country to go among the people and talk to them, I'm sure he would agree to it, both from courtesy to us and because he values friendship with calm. Nea, do you remember the dream I had long ago, when I visited this country in my sleep, and saw the high priest disguise himself as a swan and pleasure himself in the 3rd sanctuary? Before I came here, I knew that these temples were without light, and I hoped that we might be the spark that kindled it for them. I thought it might be that these people were old ones who were obscured, that their own knowledge was hidden from them because of some misuse of it in the past. Such people are like a heap of dry palm wood, which a little flame can turn into a blaze. Now I know this hope was in vain, for I have been told, away from earth, that the Minoans are not obscured, but are young, and you cannot light a beacon fire of young green wood. Although they are not ready to be priests themselves, we could send a teacher to them, and if they listened to his wisdom, they would hand his word down from one generation to another. Even if Ptah himself should come here, and there were some who listened and revered his words, passed them on to all they met, wrote down his teaching and carved his laws in stone, in 100 years the people would have forgotten the meaning of his words unless there were true priests to follow him. For the teaching to be alive, wisdom must flow down to earth through open gateways, or soon it will become dead as the arm cut from a sculpture, whose fingers lose their power as soon as the master's blood reaches them no longer. But even if their memory of true knowledge were fainter than it once had been, surely that would be better than to have nothing, nothing that is permanent, nothing that lasts through time. Minoas would be the poorer for hearing half-remembered truths. If there are a few grains of gold in a bowl of sand, there are a few who seek the shining grains, and many who say that all of it is worthless. In these temples they have men, not priests. What would it serve them if they spoke other words? What if our priests, when challenged how their knowledge came to them, no longer answered, "I have seen these things myself and know that they are true," but instead would say, "Of course, I cannot know this for myself, but long ago a wise man said these things, for they are carved on a steel 7 cubits high, and inscribed in an early papyrus roll." If any priest in calm should answer thus, there is not one in the land so foolish to heed his words. There's much wisdom of the past inscribed, and it is well these records should be read. For though all true teachers throughout time have taught the same, there have been some who phrase truth so well, so that their words awaken the hearts of those who hear them. This one truth has many degrees of brilliance, and from all who hold it, it shines. First, as from a little lamp, which can but drive the shadow from a room, until at last it blazes like a sun, which can drive out the darkness from a world. The lamp of light can shine on earth only when there are priests attend it, and when the priests are gone for a little time, the wick glows, and then it is only an empty lamp, and though its alabaster may be richly carved, soon it becomes lifeless and without warmth. The time will come when these people will realize their hunger. Then will their priests make praise and chant in vain, and none will watch this mockery of the gods, and those who once looked on these ceremonies will find more wisdom in the marketplace. Then will come whispers round cooking fires, in vineyards and in pastures and on ships, whispers that say, "We are alone, we know not whither we go nor whence we came, we are afraid." And through time these wisps of words will grow until they challenge the gods, saying, "We demand thy wisdom for ourselves." And the gods will send them children, who are long in years and who can walk across the causeway to the gods. And the children will return and speak to these people in a clear voice, and in the strength of wise integrity they shall say, "This is the truth, for I am priest." The next chapter, chapter 7, is a short chapter, so I shall read that as well. Chapter 7, the Sorcerer. Not far from the palace there was a little valley, dark with trees, and it was in a ruined temple. And in it was a ruined temple. None would go near this place after sunset or before the day was light, for they held that it was an abode of evil spirits, and that any who went there at the full moon would return with vacant eyes, so great was the horror that they would see. When I would have questioned Kiodas about it, he was ill at ease, and I saw it was a thing of which he feared to speak. And I wondered whether there were really some evil thing in that place, or whether it were a bodiless one who was imprisoned there by his own ignorance and needed succor. So I decided to leave the palace quietly by night and find the secret of this ruined place. Pater thought it was well that we should go there, and so together we left the palace in the moonlight, and we went up the valley in the heavy shadow of cedar trees. The temple was a little sanctuary with fallen pillars, and a tree was growing through the broken floor beside the crumbling statue of a god. It had the muffled smell of musty leaves and long decay. Sodden with despair, fear clung about it like a shroud of thick grey cobwebs, and I could understand the terror of them who came here. Pater signed to me to be still, and covered his eyes. He looked upon this place, and he said, "There is one here who died 500 years ago. His name was Cherondades. He was born with some little knowledge, and if he had been patient he might have learned something of seership. But he was greedy for knowledge, and tried to force the gateways of others with a bar of filth. He knew that people who are in a weakened body or who have a high fever see things that are not for all men's eyes. And he brought 3 women to this place, young girls of little will, and made them eat of loathsomeness, of stillborn children and the excrement of cats, the eggs of snakes and live cockroaches in oil. And when their bodies revolted in great sickness, again he made them eat until their bodies were so weakened that they could not hold the spirit, and they saw beyond their flesh and raved in horror at the things they saw. He that should have been a priest had become a sorcerer. And for many years he recorded their speech, until at last one of the girls rebelled against him and put a poisonous fungus in his food, and he died in great agony. He is doing but one thing over and over again throughout the years. He eats of filth that he made others eat, and then he writhers in his death agony. And then again he stoops towards the fire and watches horror bubbling in the pot, yet cannot stay his hand which puts it to his lips. He does not know he has been here 500 years, for, caught in an eternal now, he knows only the present, and to him this endless horror is forever fresh. Then Patakifa told me to release him, and while he watched to see that all was well, I left my body wrapped in his cloak upon the ground. Then I felt this clinging greyness close to me, and I drove it forth with brilliant yellow light. I knew that he whom I must release was at my feet, yet I could not see him clearly, but only as a cowering shape, and I commanded him, "You shall hear my words. Death shall be no longer in your nostrils. Your tongue shall not know decay, and your eyes shall no more see filth, for you shall sleep. And when you wake, you shall be born again under the sun." Then at my feet I saw not a man old in his sorcery, but a young man as he had been before he walked in slime. And he was like a young goatherd I had seen sleeping in the sun while his flocks gazed under the olive trees upon the mountainside. Then I returned to my body, and Patakifa cleansed this place with the waters of peace, so that the memory was cleansed from it, just as the life of Ptah cleanses a poisoned wound. And we left the valley a place of peace, and the moonlight shone upon it, unobscured. So again she has released a dark spirit. Have a great Friday. Bye.